What's going on, guys? My name is Matt, and recently I gave myself the challenge of trying to put together a gaming PC for the low price of $100. I've done this before, but this time I wanted to make sure it was able to play some of today's most popular titles, and I think I did pretty good. For example, Fortnite with epic view distance and everything else set to low, this PC averages above 90 FPS, which I think is pretty impressive for its price. Now, before I reveal all the parts, I do want to go over a few disclaimers. The first is that this PC is using used parts. You can't really put together a new PC for $100, let alone anything that's going to be able to play any games. And the second disclaimer is that this isn't necessarily meant to be a guide on how to put together a gaming PC for $100. This is more meant to show you that if you put in the time, effort, and research, you can put together a gaming PC for very cheap. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the parts that make up this $100 gaming PC. If you're on a very tight budget and wanting the most performance for your money, then buying and upgrading a pre-built is the way to go. After watching listings on eBay for a few weeks, I snagged an insane deal on this Dell Optiplex 390. This PC was just $44 with free shipping, and this Optiplex acted as the base to this gaming PC build. Opening up this PC for the first time, it was definitely a little dusty, but nothing a little elbow grease can't fix. Also, because this system is so old, I decided to change out the CPU thermal paste. I just unscrewed the cooler, cleaned off the old and crusty thermal paste, then applied a fresh application of thermal paste. In terms of the CPU this thermal paste is going onto, this Dell Optiplex has a quad-core i5-2400 that turbos up to 3.4 GHz, and while this is an older CPU, it holds up surprisingly well in modern titles. Pairing the CPU with a budget graphics card provides one of the best value for the money combos available today. This CPU is sitting inside of the generic LGA 1155 Dell motherboard, which while basic, gets the job done and supports all the hardware I plan to put in. For RAM, the system only came with 4GB, which while okay for light 1080p gaming, it really isn't ideal, and this is where I made the first upgrade. I bought a 4GB stick of DDR3 for $10 on Craigslist, which is a pretty standard price for 4GB of DDR3, but because there are only 2 DIMM slots on this motherboard, it means I have to replace one of the existing 2GB sticks to make use of the new 4GB one. After doing this, it left me with a total of 6GB of DDR3 RAM, which while not ideal, is enough for a lot of games. For storage, the system came with a 250GB mechanical drive with Windows 10 pre-installed and activated. This is one of the big pluses for going with a pre-built, which is the fact it's going to usually come with a key for Windows 7, which can be used to activate Windows 10. While 250GB isn't ideal, it was enough for the OS, all the games tested, and all of the benchmarking and monitoring software. Powering the system is a measly 265 watt PSU with no 80+ rating. While this PSU would be fine for this system plus something like a GT 1030, because I was planning to put in a powerful GPU, I needed a much beefier PSU with supplemental PCIe power. What I put in was an EVGA 600 watt 80+ white PSU. I got this for only $15 with free shipping during one of EVGA's midweek madness sales. If you don't already know, EVGA has a sale on their refurbished inventory every Wednesday, and sometimes you can snag some good deals on stuff like PSUs and graphics cards. 600 watts is more than enough for this system, and even though this is a non-modular power supply, you really can't complain for only $15. Installing this was pretty simple. I unplugged the old PSU connectors, unscrewed it from the back and pulled it out, then just plopped the new PSU in its place and plugged everything in. So when the system first came in, it was just using integrated graphics with no dedicated GPU. So what I did was watched eBay listings for a while and eventually bid on and won an HD 7850 2GB card for around $36 shipped. This is already a really good deal, but I managed to bring the net cost down even further. See, this GPU was shipped in a 1080 Ti box. I thought this was pretty funny, so I posted it on Twitter, and Danny from Nerd on a Budget informed me people pay good money for these high-end GPU boxes, which honestly surprised me. So what I did was list the box on eBay, and within a few days I sold it, and after shipping and eBay fees, walked away with around $11, making the net cost of this GPU after selling the box only $25, which is an insane price for this card. While the HD 7870 is old, it still holds up surprisingly well for its age, and has 2GB of video memory, which for our purposes works fine. This is the XFX Ghost version, and I think it looks pretty good with a silver and red shroud and decent fin and heat pipe design. But just like with the CPU, because the GPU is old, the thermal paste should be replaced. Sometimes it's as simple as unscrewing 4 screws to access the PCB, but in this case it was more like 15 screws. Once those were out, I carefully removed the cooler and disconnected the fan connector. I cleaned off the old thermal paste and applied a new layer. I then just reassembled the card. This takes like 10 minutes and it can improve the temps and noise significantly, and many times can even improve performance if the card was thermal throttling. This card installed really easily. I just popped open the PCIe back retention clip, removed the 2 slot covers, and popped in the card. I then installed PCIe power and everything was installed. Next, all I did was cable manage things and boom, the system was done. Windows 10 was already installed, so I just had to boot it up and install some games. For testing, I used 4 popular titles with varying levels of system requirements, and these include Overwatch, Fortnite, PUBG, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, one of the latest and hardest to run games out. The first game tested was Overwatch, which I set to the medium preset at 1080p with 100% resolution scaling, and at these settings the system produced a 63 FPS average with 1% lows of 52. This was a really smooth experience with an almost locked 60 FPS, but you could definitely turn down some of the settings if you wanted higher frame rates. Moving on to Fortnite, after you guys telling me I should test my system with pro settings, I decided to test the system at 1080p with epic view distance and everything else set to low. This gave a 95 FPS average, with it sometimes hovering around the mid 80s and sometimes hovering above 100 FPS. Overall, this is a great experience and definitely more than playable for competitive Fortnite. Up next is PUBG at 1080p low settings. The system produced an average of 52 FPS with 1% lows of 43. This was a decent experience, but obviously averaging below 60 FPS isn't ideal. With that being said, it was totally playable and provided smooth gameplay. Finally, for my final boss of benchmark, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a new and hard to run AAA title, I set everything to low at 1080p and used the built-in benchmark. This resulted in a 48 FPS average, which while not great, shows you that even new AAA titles can be played on this machine if you're willing to lower the settings, resolution, or both. Overall, I'm really happy with how this system performs. For $100, this is probably the best price to performance system I've ever made, and hope you guys think so too. I'll be leaving links in the description for certain part suggestions if you're wanting to put something like this together yourself. My best advice is to be patient, watch listings for a few weeks, and you should find a good deal on what you're looking for. So yeah guys, I think this wraps this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, as well as consider subscribing for more PC and tech related content in the future. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.